welcome to Plot Twisters.
This is a podcast where we take movies and twist the plot to see if we can make them better. And if not, more sure.
At the moment, we're talking about teen movies from the 80s.
On this episode, The Sure Thing from 1985.
I'm Emma and I'm intellectual and stuff.
I'm Anders. I wish my name was Nick. Nick's a real name. Nick's your buddy. Nick's the kind of guy you can trust. The kind of guy you can drink a beer with. The kind of guy he doesn't mind if you puke in the back of his car. Nick.
Sounds like a cool guy. Welcome back, listeners, to another episode here in the 1980s.
What's up?
We're talking about The Sure Thing. And let me just say, don't you miss the 80s when the only thing people really had to care about was like how much sex they were having? Like that was the only problem if you were a young person.
It was a different time. Everything was so simple. I need to worry about whether or not I'm getting some, and also, I guess, go to the mall sometimes.
Yeah, it's just so many of these films. That's what it is. I mean, I know they're teen movies, but I can't help but feel like, I don't know, most of my worries are like economy related at the moment.
Is that thing where, like, you know, actually, we all have real worries today, real legitimate terrifying worries, but back then it was simpler. I mean, I'm sure people in the 80s thought that. I'm pretty sure people in the 80s were like, gosh, the 60s were quite simple, weren't they? You know? It's all from, you know, wherever one man's trash is another man's treasure. Did you know that? You know that thing? It's the same thing.
I guess so. Yeah, that's a phrase that applies. Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, this movie, let me introduce you to it. And great news, it's an incredibly straightforward plot. So here we go. We have Walter Gibson, also known as Gib, and we have Alison Bradbury. And these are two people who are going to go on a road trip together, but they don't know it yet. They're in class at a school on the East Coast. Somewhere. And they both have these different things going on in their lives. Gib is a bit of a sort of what's the phrase, like a person who is just living their life, taking every day as it comes, free spirit, you know, not really too worried about anything other than who he's dating. He writes an essay about pizza, and it's read out in this class, and this professor points out that it's an interesting topic, but it's not a very disciplined essay. And he also has got some pizza on the essay. Alison is in a very different kind of state. She also reads out an essay. Oh no, her essay is also talked about in this class. And the feedback that she gets is that it's too disciplined, it's too perfect, and there's no spirit and there's no personality in it. And her professor says to her she needs to lighten up a bit and, you know, go out and experience life. And they have this great phrase.
Are you saying that these two polar opposites were almost written to like get together and be the original odd couple, and they're gonna, you know? Are you saying that this is a bit obvious right at the very, very beginning?
It's almost like you have these two people who both need to learn a thing, and then the other person has the thing that they need to learn.
If only they could go on a road trip together to figure it out. If only they
were forced together in some kind of situation where they have to get to know each other. Which they do. They both need to go to California. Alison is going because she wants to see her boyfriend, who's going to be a lawyer, and is very practical sort of chap. And Gib has heard from a friend of his who currently lives in California that there is a woman who is waiting to meet him. And this woman is, in fact, a sure thing. She's down to clown, and she does not have any further strings that may or may not be attached to that situation. She's just a ready and raw body waiting for Gib to do things too. So he's been invited to California to go and seal the deal.
That is so far. Sorry, I'm sorry. I keep interrupting. California's a really far way to go for SAG. It's so far. I'm sorry. I'll
but
say
have
this
you
later.
seen this woman? Gib has. He has a photo of her, and he goes, "Wow." Or is the photo of her? Or is it someone who looks like her? I didn't quite get that. I think it's a photo of her.
It's a bikini lady, and he's like,
a lady in
"I
a
better
bikini.
cross the country for sex." Continue. I'm so sorry, everybody. I'm so sorry.
No, the key thing though is not just the woman herself. It's very specifically the situation attached to the woman, which is the lack of attachment. The friend is very clear. This woman will sex you, and that's it. She's hot. She's there for one night, and then no emotional investment, time investment.
That's
needed.
the dream, everybody.
That is the dream. So these two people go on a road trip together. Now, this is another thing I didn't get.
Right.
They end up in a car with these two adults.
One of them's Tim Robbins.
I don't know who that is.
He's that guy from the Hudsucker Proxy who's like, for kids. He invents a hula hoop.
I have no idea.
Whatever, it doesn't matter. Some one of them's this guy.
Well, I mean, our listeners might know who that is.
Yeah, they all know. Everybody's hearing this going, come on, the Hudsucker Proxy. Remember that one?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they end up in this car, and I didn't get why they were in that car with these two people. I know neither of them can afford a plane ticket.
Yeah.
But they go in a car with just two strangers.
It was like a rideshare. It was like a pre-Uber situation. Not even that. It was just like there was a message board at the school that was like, do you want to kick in for some gas and you can get a ride to California?
Right.
I think people used to do that.
Okay.
It's the same thing that happened. It's the same thing that happened in When Harry Met Sally, which, by the way, we need to talk about because this movie felt like a little bit like that movie.
Yeah.
Two different people get together just because they're sharing a ride. It's very practical.
I didn't have the context for that, but no, I understand it now. So then they are forced together, even though they already actually had a sort of date, although it was that he was going to study with her, and it went really badly. So it starts off really badly. They start off really disliking each other, but then guess what? Over time, they find out that actually that's just masking something else, which is love. They eventually get kicked out of this car because they're being too odd. So they end up having to hitchhike and do various other things to get across the country.
Yep.
Eventually they arrive at California, where Gib is presented with the sure thing and Allison is presented with her boyfriend, but they both eventually decide not to pursue these romantic ventures any further, instead to return home and pursue one another. And Gib does that by rewriting an essay that is read aloud in class, in which he confesses that he didn't go for this other woman.
Yep.
And it is in fact called The Sure
Thing.
And that's this film.
I don't know why I'm clapping. I just felt like
it's just my delivery. I'm just an amazing orator.
I need roses, a standing ovation, and some sort of Variety magazine style interview afterwards, where I can profile your performance in the retelling of the 1985 classic The Sure Thing, or something else of an equal or similar value, monetarily speaking. Yep.
Can I say the first thing about this?
On this occasion? Okay? Yeah, sure.
So in previous episodes, we've discussed other movies. If you didn't know. And we often tend to have two kind of specific, differing but equally valid approaches to analysing a movie. Yeah. I would say yours is the more literal interpretation often, and mine is the slightly more analytical interpretation.
Yeah.
So to just break character from that specific style,
whoa,
briefly,
sure.
you know what would have solved all the issues in this movie?
Money?
Trains.
Tell me more.
Why didn't they get a train?
Have you been to America? You can't just get on a train.
No.
What are you, a cow? That's not a thing there.
Why don't they have trains that you can get?
I don't know. And the thing is isn't that crazy? Because, like, do you know that thing? It's a big deal one time in American history where they built what they called the Transcontinental Railroad. And it connected New York City and Los Angeles via a train. And the mayor of, like, Wisconsin or whatever, Ohio, what's in the middle? Wyoming or something. He came out and he was all like, it's a big deal. We have a train that goes from all the way on the left-hand side of this place to all the way on the right-hand side. But then America had a meeting and they all decided, we don't do trains. Nope. We are a car nation. And so that's why the car was born. And that's why nobody takes trains anymore. Weren't you paying attention in history class?
But like, this is the thing. There are so many road trips. Is this why so many rom-coms are set in America? Is because they have road trips?
Because they have road trips.
Things that you can. That's how you fall in love. Is you go on a road trip. If you go on a train, it's harder to fall in love because you have to be quiet so that you don't disturb the other passengers.
Yeah, exactly. You can't fall in love on a train.
That's why nobody in Britain falls in love, because we're all being respectful of other people in the quiet carriage.
Exactly right. It's called Paradise by Dashboard Light, not Paradise by that window in the older style trains that you think should open, but it doesn't open, and everybody's really hot and sweaty. Called the movie. I don't know. Like, you're right. So you're saying that this movie would have been totally different if Gib and the uptight girl Allison just got on a train.
Like, there's a bit where they are trying to get a bus, and I'm like, why? Yeah. That's horrible. Why would you? I don't like getting a bus to London, and that's like 3 hours on a bus. Imagine doing like a. No,
it was also a really expensive bus too,
really
right?
Expensive. Like $60 or something, wasn't it?
In the 80s.
Yeah.
See, can I have?
Whoa.
I think it was like $80 or something. But this is what's wrong with America then, and also probably today. It's a transport infrastructure issue. Because
they have the subway, so they have small trains, or should I say light rail?
They do have the little trains.
Why
America's really good for the trains that are underground, but when they're on top, it's probably a weather thing. It's probably too hot or too cold or something. I don't know. Or maybe they could have just gotten on a plane, or maybe Gib could have stayed in Vermont,
or maybe they
whatever.
could have just not done the story of the movie.
Because here's the thing. Look, because here's the thing.
Everybody just stay at home.
You know how sometimes people do way crazy things to achieve a thing that you could just achieve at home.
There are women on the East Coast.
I know.
That's what you want. There's a woman on the West.
There are women. Gib, there are women everywhere. And if you are,
except in the House of Representatives at the time, probably.
Take that, Congress. And also in the president's chair. The king's chair. That's not a thing. Is that what it's called? Behind the Oval Office.
America had a king in the 80s.
Yeah. Exactly. His name was actually, his name was Michael Jackson. But King
Elvis.
He was the
Elvis
first
king.
Yeah. Do you know that there were a lot of? It's the whole royal family and the king. It's a bit like there was
Madonna was the queen.
Exactly. And then
Britney's the princess.
Prince was the prince.
Prince was the prince.
Right.
Yeah,
and then they had a meeting and they decided that they needed to hand it all over to the new generation, and that's where NSYNC came from. There are women everywhere, Gib. I assume you just working for somebody who works so hard to achieve a thing. You're just doing it wrong, basically. But what was that? What would have happened if he wasn't on that road trip? Allison would have gotten to California. She would have married her lawyer boyfriend, and they would have slowly worked on making those sheets softer over time. So you did the practical thing. Do you want me to do like a analytical, analysis, right? Well, here's my deep analysis of this movie.
Ooh.
It's a movie about two people who go to California who learn about each other on the way, because it's an analogy of how life is a journey, and at every stop you need to make sure that you have enough money to buy food, So
it's a commentary on capitalism.
It absolutely is. And in many ways, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and those fat cats in Washington, and that because it's all satirical. Didn't you see the signs? Everything is an analogy. So, I'd love to see some of those capitalists watching this movie and not feel awkward at the end. I did like that joke when she was like, I have a credit card. And he goes, this isn't that kind of lock. There's this scene where he's trying to break into a trailer and he's hitting this lock with a rock. And then she realizes after they thought they had no money that she has a credit card. And he says, it's not that kind of lock. That's the kind of comedy I show up for.
And then she says, oh, but my dad said to only use it in an emergency. And then
I
hope one of those comes along, and that's very funny. And then it cuts to them sitting in a really fancy restaurant drinking wine.
Oh, but then they said, it's too bad this is the only place that takes credit cards. And I was trying to figure out if that was just them treating themselves to a lovely fancy meal, or if because it was the 80s you had to ask around whether or not a place took credit cards. And then I didn't pay attention to the next 5 minutes of the movie because I was just thinking about how places... because how we used to use money and now we don't, and it made me feel weird. Because I think,
again, just being really relentlessly practical for some reason whilst we're talking about this
great
lovey-dovey movie.
Sure.
Wasn't it a thing that credit cards and debit cards were quite distinct?
Yeah.
And you'd be able to use one in some circumstances and not in others?
I think so.
Right.
I remember getting my first ever credit card and feeling like a big shot, but then also being so worried that I wouldn't actually have any money because I never had any money and I didn't at the time. But I still remember being like, oh, I'll swipe my credit card for this. Thank you very much. But, that feeling left, and I returned to my default setting of feeling just about average at best most of the time. This is why we keep needing to top up the old cup of positivity. Hey, this is one of those movies that we watched for the podcast that makes me wonder whether or not people out there have seen this movie other than me, and I'm hoping right now that there are I was going to say if there's one person out there, I'm hoping there are a lot of people who are listening going, flip, yeah, The Sure Thing. I love this movie. Nobody ever talks about The Sure Thing. And I'm with you guys. I'm also there going, yeah, remember The Sure Thing? The problem is I feel like we, the Sure Thingers out there, are the minority. Things. The Sure Things. We're the surest things. Us, the most surers of the things. I feel like we're in an elite club, y'all. And that if we haven't started like our own Facebook group that has the annual Sure Thing meetup, we need to, because I don't know if a lot of people have seen this movie before. And that makes me, I don't know what it makes me. Have you never seen this movie before? Be honest, right, Emma?
I've never seen this movie before.
Cool. And that's fine. It's fine that you haven't seen it. It's fine that most people haven't seen it. It was a struggle to find this movie on the internet. I'll tell you that for free, though.
I think that it's an interesting one because it's very, well, it's very formulaic, really, isn't it? And it's very familiar. As you said, When Harry Met Sally. We've talked about loads of other movies which have done this exact thing, which is two people who should probably be together don't like each other, but it's because of romantic tension, and then they are together. Right. And I think it's a shame because I do think that this is a well-written film. I think it has a good script and there are good jokes the relationship between Alison and Gib, I think, is good. It has good moments. It's nothing. It's not. It's not amazing. It's good. And I think that this film probably doesn't have the same sort of cultural longevity as other films by our favourite Mr. John Cusack, just because of the fact that it's so familiar and it's not really doing anything special.
Yeah.
I think the title of it is somewhat misleading in a way, because it's almost like it's hard to phrase this. I was thinking, I think the thing that's missing is that there needed to be some sort of double meaning to that title, which is that The Sure Thing is the title of the film. It's what's referenced the most. It's the final big kind of moment at the end when he talks about when he reads that essay and then he says the sure thing. But they're still really only talking about this other woman. Yeah. There needed to be some way to tie that back to Alison, I think, which is that she could have also been a sure thing, except in this meaning, it was a sure thing that they were going to get together right from the start. Yep. So it could have been that there was something right at the start of the film. I mean, we saw it as viewers because we know that when they were having these essays read out, one has too much of this, and the other one has too much of the other thing, and they're chalk and cheese. But there should have been some sense of fate or something to give it that extra duality to that title, because I think the fact that this other woman is so much a part of the story does undermine the lead story, because the real story is Alison and Gib.
Maybe
almost,
well, maybe okay, couple of punch up ideas. Number one, they should have just called this movie The Long Shot, right? Because it was a long shot between him and Allison, and also he had to go really far for the other one. The other thing is what if maybe what was missing was before they go to California, Gib also in a she's all that scenario helps Allison be less uptight and more popular. Is that what this should have been? A pre-road trip Pygmalion situation.
Because he does do that through the course of it. Like,
she's doing shotguns of beers at the end.
With the beer. And I think it's fine, but it would be great if this was the only movie that was this story. But because it isn't, in order for it to feel really special for me as a viewer, watching this film from 35 years ago. No, 45 years ago. 35? How many years?
Hang on one darn second. This movie came out in 1985, okay?
Yeah.
So it's not 45 years old. That's too old.
35 years
30...
old.
37.
37 years old.
That's old.
Quick maths.
Yeah, quick maths. Nailed it.
And obviously I'm saying this not as a independent review of the film as a standalone thing. I'm saying that as somebody who's watching it within the context of all the other things I've seen.
But this is, we said this before. It's hard to watch a thing now knowing that a lot of movies like that have come out afterwards and not go, well, yeah, that thing that when it came out didn't have all this extra content to compare it to, but it's out there now. I can't not compare it to that. So it's been done better since. Therefore, it's not as good then or now. Yeah.
Well, and I suppose we're investigating, as you said, have people seen this? Do people remember it? Is it a film that's really well known about? I suppose me purely as a marker of somebody who wouldn't have seen it who definitely wouldn't have seen it at the right sort of time.
Yep.
Yeah, I didn't know about it.
Okay.
But having said that, I am a big fan of John Cusack, and I still didn't know about it. So
yeah. I only knew about this because I used to work in a video store, and because I was obsessed with John Cusack, and am to this day, and so I sought out all the movies that he was in. However, I ask you this. So this is an interesting question. So if sometimes I think about I liked this movie. I don't, we'll rate it at the end, and I'm not going to show you all my cards yet. Okay, I'm going to keep them close to my chest. But I would ask you this: where do you think is the optimal? What's the optimal context for this movie? I.e., if somebody said to you, "Hey, I really like John Cusack," how would you recommend this movie to them? And for what occasion?
I think it's a party movie.
Ooh, nice.
Like you have 3 to 6 friends over.
I'm having 7 friends over.
No good.
Okay. Thank you. Dodge that bullet.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a hard one. And I suppose it was inevitable that I was going to have to talk about this eventually, which is that the somewhat lecherous elements of it, which is the whole obsession with this woman who is Nicolette Sheridan, by the way, who I know from Desperate Housewives, so that's very fun. She's Edie in Desperate Housewives.
Oh, wow.
That kind of absolute fixation with her as this sort of sex object, and the moment where they're in a lorry and they're talking to the lorry driver who's saying, that you've got this opportunity to do this incredible golden thing, which is have sex without any strings attached. I'll do anything to help you out, bro.
Yeah. You pay the parking tickets and I'll whatever, and we'll just get you there. And he floors it.
I'm sure at the time that probably went down very well with the audience of the 80s. To me now, as a viewer, that just comes across as kind of icky and uncomfortable, and that's not something that I personally would enjoy experiencing with other people. That kind of, it's like the idea of watching, like when in American Pie they get that live stream of the girl undressing, and then they all sit around with a beer and watch it, and it's like a kind of group ogling. That's just very, very foreign to me. And so I think that is a thing that just really, I don't think it's particularly problematic, because I think they are presenting Gibb as a bit of an idiot, but
right.
Yeah,
that's a shame. You need something better than that. If it'd be great if that wasn't the premise. You could get those two in a car for any number of reasons to get to California. And that would have been great, because that's the whole thing. Two people, they're opposites. They have an adventure, and then through it they fall in love. For me, when I would recommend this movie to somebody would be, even if, or especially if they've never seen it, / especially, hey, do you want something? You got like a sort of a lazy Saturday kind of vibe going on, and you want to watch something that is comforting, nostalgic, but you've never seen it? Watch this movie, right?
An easy watch, for sure.
Because you'll think you've seen it before, but I can guarantee you haven't seen it before. But that's fine. And I'll tell you this. I like movies that are just nice and feely good sometimes, and I like finding... It's like when you watch Indiana Jones and you're like, there's got to be more movies like Indiana Jones. And the thing is, there kind of aren't, but you could watch Romancing the Stone, and that's kind of like Indiana Jones. And if you watched, I don't know, When Harry Met Sally Friday night, and Saturday you're like, I wish there were other movies like that. Hey, man, you could do a lot worse than watching The Sure Thing. It's not perfect, but it'll give you the same kind of feels. And then, after that, you can go, we should watch When Harry Met Sally again. It's kind of nice to occasionally have movies that are like other movies, so that you can add to that overall comforting ball of nostalgia, even if it's something you've never seen before. That's my hot take on this movie.
Where does this sit in the John Cusack timeline of events?
Oh, boy.
What I need to know.
Right in the thick of it.
Let's have a look here, because what I want to know is that where
probably tell you.
Here we go. So we have 16 Candles was 1984.
Yep.
Right before this, and then right after this was Better Off Dead. And then later we have Stand By Me, One Crazy Summer, Hot Pursuit. So, and then a few movies after that is Say Anything. So
yeah,
he definitely hit. Well, my favorite is Say Anything.
Obviously.
Now we've done, I think,
Obviously.
now we've done all the John Cusack 80s movies we're going to do.
Yeah,
So,
we've done them all. All the ones we're going to do, we've done them.
I think he has there are a few characters. In fact, The Sure Thing, Better Off Dead, and Say Anything are kind of all very similar characters.
Yeah.
And he does it the best when he's Lloyd Dobler in Say Anything, because
For sure.
he has an extra edge of sort of humility and sensitivity in his performance and in the character that I think that Gibb in this character doesn't have.
Yeah.
He just seems like somebody is experimenting with John Cusack. Like, it seems like there are really great moments, but he's not doing what he does best yet.
No.
Which is the guy who's different. He's not like the other guys, you know? He is like the other guys in this film. He is just another kind of douchey guy. And when he gets to Say Anything, he's artistic and interesting, and he pursues her, and he does, he's romantic, and he does the things that he needs to do to get the girl. He doesn't mess about like he does in this one, and he's not just... I know, obviously, I'm talking about the characters, obviously not actually him, but I suppose if we are comparing those two characters with his performance connected, he was underused in this, and the character wasn't right for him, and I prefer Say Anything to this one. Hey, you know what else is a sure thing? If you send a podcast recommendation to your friend, there's like a 70% chance that they might listen to it. You know what friends are like. But hey, why not try anyway? Because if they do listen, they might just love it.
The sure thing. It's a sure thing. Dude, it's a sure thing.
I think maybe we could try and run with the thing that I was saying earlier about how there needs to be some kind of double meaning to the title. You suggested The Long Shot, which I like. I wonder if that's a film. Probably. In which case, it's a long it's a long shot. If he goes to California, he'll get to do a sex to the woman. But it's also a long shot. Maybe she says, dating Meek, that's a long shot, that kind of thing. What? Let's there's the clay. Let's get
into it.
Let's get some water on our hands and get glooping.
Can I be honest with you? I will tell you, just this is the thing about me that you may or may not know. I don't like getting my fingers dirty. When it comes to like gloopy stuff on my fingers, I don't do well in that scenario.
I love it. I love it.
And that's why you and I need to go on a road trip of discovery together.
And the outcome of that road trip is that you suddenly start...
suddenly start liking the feel of clay in my fingers, and you like it less, I guess.
I was going to suggest it's like you have to... Like, you've inherited a farm.
Great.
But you don't
but I have to touch
the mucky
stuff.
Animals.
Sure. And
then we go on a road trip, and by the end of it,
exactly. You're a cow in this, or a
well, excuse me, Mister. If I'm a cow, you're a pig.
Exactly. And I'm a pig and you're a cow, and we're on a road trip together because I've just inherited a people farm. It's opposite.
This is what I really like in comedy. Is when it's really clear that the people creating the comedy are clinging to a sinking ship, but they just keep going.
Yeah,
they
exactly.
Keep going.
Keep going.
We are rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic right now.
Hey, if you're going through hell, keep going.
Keep going to get to hell 2. Worse hell, even deeper. Even You're on circle 1 of Dante's Infernal.
This is season
Inferno.
1 of a 7-series box set of Going to Hell. And don't worry, because there are bloopers and there's a director's commentary. In this scene, I remember filming it and thinking, they can't keep going that way. And yet they did. You know? So
So what should the title of the movie be?
Okay. The maybe sex. He might have. They might.
No. I'm sorry. Just sex? Question mark.
Right. And
it's a double thing because he might have sex with the sure thing.
Sure.
He might also have sex with Allison, or instead of.
Or
there are 2 women that he might have sex with.
Yeah.
And the film's called Sex,
and
because that's essentially what it is, isn't it?
That's it. That is what it is.
Will he have sex with one of them or the other one?
God, what
the movie?
What a plot, huh? Hey, John
Isn't
Cusack.
it fun when you totally reduce movies down to a single sentence?
Okay, yeah, it is.
On that note, can I tell you about a really great tweet that I saw the other day?
For sure.
I'll have to see if I can remember it for the joke to work, but it was something like, trust fund kid inherits a bunch of money and becomes a cop. No. Trust fund kid marries his high school girlfriend and becomes a cop.
Right.
Also known as Harry Potter. Because he inherits a bunch of money, he marries Ginny, and then he becomes an Auror, which is basically a wizard cop.
I
just thought it was really funny.
Do that. You can't take so many things and squish it into one sentence. Well, I mean, I guess you can. You know, you could just say Mad Men. You know, advertising guy eventually retires.
Advertising guy drinks a lot. Does a lot of drinking, a lot of smoking, and a lot of sex.
Yep.
And then at the end, he's kind of still sad.
Yep. Brackets.
Because he does a
Sterling
lot
Cooper,
of sex and smoking because he's sad, and at
Yeah.
the end of it, he's still sad.
Yeah. ... But the last season's in California. You know.
Yeah. Man creates a business.
Mm-hmm.
Which starts out well, but ends badly.
Oh, Breaking Bad?
Breaking Bad, yeah.
Yeah, nice. Okay,
Yeah.
Okay. Suburban family of 5 mishaps, and it just keeps going forever.
This is Malcolm in the Middle.
Dope.
Adults
Friends.
don't want to grow up.
Friends.
Friends, How I Met Your Mother, Arrested Development, Friends from College, or whatever that show's called.
Sure.
New Girl, yeah.
It's all. Everything's
the same. Everything's the same.
So the movie's called Sex. And maybe if all right.
Yeah.
Let me give you an unrealistic, but for whatever reason, this is a plot point. Do you remember in the movie, which was the one where all the boys were like, "Let's all have sex before summer"? Oh, the American Pie. What if John Cusack's character has a medical? Hear me out. Just hear me out. The doctor says, like the bus from Speed, you have to do it, or you will explode.
If you stop doing it, then you're gonna die.
Exactly. And so the doctor says, and so he literally has to get to California to have sex or die. And
when he gets there, he gets arrested.
Yes.
And he's put in a jail cell, and there's all these honeys in all the other cells, and it's called sex cells.
That's good. That's good.
What about it's called Sex ? And it's sex ellipsis question mark, and it's just a man, an 18-year-old man in the 80s, and a series of women,
mm-hmm.
and your job as the viewer is to guess which one he's gonna
do it.
Yeah, is that
that sounds like a TV show people would watch?
It's like that's like The Bachelor, basically, isn't it?
It's like The Bachelor, but it's. Did you say old man? Or did I just dream that?
I don't know. Did I? I can't remember.
You said old man.
I have to go back in the recording and listen. And did I say old man?
So I mean, but like, it would be at least more straightforward if we called the movie sex, and I'm fine with that. And actually, that's what we would do if you made a movie now in 2022 or whatever, right? The movie's just called Sex. The movie, Sex the movie, and John Cusack. Maybe in it would go, he would have said earlier to Allison, they would have said, why are you going to California? Sex. It's a medical thing. I have to do it for
the doctor said.
The doctor said, it's not like I want to.
Is the doctor hot? Is the doctor like, for medical reasons, you need to do a sex? And it's a hot doctor.
It's a hot doctor.
And it's actually not a regular movie. It's look, no. Okay.
No.
Stop.
Right. Bring it home.
Bring it home.
Pivot, and bring it home.
I think I'm just going to say something mildly intelligent for a bit, and then we can go back to the stupidity, okay?
Great.
Which is that I think that this film, the coming of ageness of this film is, boys, stop viewing women as objects and start viewing them as people to interact with for more than just sex ? I personally think that is a problematic viewpoint to have of young men. Mm-hmm. Obviously, I never was one. However, I think that reducing young men to beings that are only interested in sex and aren't able to view women as anything other than sex objects is not a fair or appropriate way to view teenage boys. And I think that does a lot of harm. I think that perhaps if you wanted to make this movie a bit more current, if you wanted to make this movie or a similar movie again and bring it up to date a bit more, you could focus on another element of the way that society treats young men and how it treats their relationship to their sexuality.
Yeah.
And explore that in a more mature way.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's kind of taken for granted that Gib is obviously going to be interested in having sex with this woman, and of course is going to want to go to California, and all the men around him reinforce this, apart from the guy in the car and apart from the boyfriend, who are both portrayed as kind of losers, right? So it's like every man you see in this film is like, of course you would go and have sex with a completely random woman that you've never met before because she's hot, without getting to know her, without any strings attached, because that's what every man wants all the time. I would like to see a version of this. You can keep the road trip in and you don't have to do trains. You can keep the somewhat cliche, well, they won't, they chalk and cheese thing, but just give us a different side of masculinity in a film like this, and show us the way that teenage boys are socialized and how that changes at that really crucial time in life. Again, from my somewhat limited experience, I would say it's much more likely that you would meet a 17, 18-year-old boy who's actually nervous about sex and is not confident with women and doesn't know how to talk to them and is concerned about doing the right thing. I would like to assume that there are lots of boys out there who are very who want to treat women like people and not just like objects, and are concerned about doing that in a good way. Yeah. So that's what I'd like to see.
I'm with you. All right. I mean, this is not the pitch, but I'm just going to say it. I'm going to say it once. I'll say it now. You can avoid all this by making this movie not about sex. You know, for example,
he has to go to California to pick up a very rare car part.
I was going to say a rare coin.
Ah,
it's the same. He's a collector. He's an admirer of furniture and needs to go and pick up a very beautiful mid-century modern armoire, from Los Angeles. And then he realizes that there's a armoire right there on the East Coast that he could have had all along.
Which is the one where John Cusack goes across to see his girlfriend on holiday?
The Hot Pursuit.
The Hot Pursuit.
Yeah. It's the same movie. Except in that one, there were
not
pirates.
Another girl there. Oh, my God. Okay.
We're starting to figure out John Cusack.
He's in one place and he needs to get to another place. John Cusack.
Always around.
I was reading a really interesting article the other day. I'm going to find the title rather than just vaguely talking about it. So if somebody wants to look it up, they can, because that's the sort of thing I would want to do. It's called Everyone is Beautiful and No One is Horny. And it was written by R.S. Benedict.
Speak for yourself, R.S. Benedict.
The subtitle is Modern Action and Superhero Films Fetishize the Body Even as They Desexualize It. And then the opening statement, which I will read because it's relevant to a film that we've talked about previously.
Oh, yeah.
When Paul Verhoeven adapted Starship Troopers in the late 1990s, did he know he was predicting the future? The endless desert war, the ubiquity of military propaganda, a cheerful face shouting victory as more and more bodies pile up. And the article goes on to talk about a very specific scene in Starship Troopers, which is the shower scene. And it's all these soldiers who are all having a shower together. They're all naked. And it's an incredibly desexualized scene. And the article's basically talking about how this kind of predicted the future, and in the sense that a lot of Marvel movies show very sexualized, very extreme bodies, like Captain America. Let's think about, if you think about his body, it's very muscular, very shiny, very, perfect form of masculinity. But there's no sex, and there are no sexual relationships. There's no chemistry between them. There's no, there's no horniness.
There's no horniness.
It's a very interesting article.
There's no horn in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's interesting.
It's just a very sexless portrayal. And, when I was reading this and I was kind of thinking about it, I was thinking about the Me Too movement and how obviously that had a huge positive impact, not only on the industry, but also on the way that stories are portrayed. And I was thinking about, now that we're kind of 5 years on from that or whatever, are storytellers slightly afraid of talking about sex? Are people don't feel confident enough to discuss it in a confident, non-problematic way, and they don't want to get called out for being problematic, so they kind of avoid it, and we end up with these very strange films which have to be mass appeal, have to be sort of, I guess, inclusive, and rather than actually challenging themselves to do the work and understand how to portray inclusive relationships and sexual chemistry, they just avoid it altogether. So I just thought that was a really interesting thing, particularly when then watching this film. It's a sweet film in a lot of ways, it's a nice relationship in a lot of ways, but there is still this kind of seedy side to the sexuality that's discussed in this movie. So how would a modern screenwriter or a modern director bring a story like this to life in a way that still feels in a way that doesn't feel seedy but is horny?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it's an interesting.
No, it's such a good point. This movie started out as one thing, and then you almost could have just started the movie in the car. They didn't. John Cusack tried to date Allison, and then that didn't work, and then they ended up in the car together. They could have just, which was to set up, I guess, some sort of like, oh yeah, we're not really friends or whatever. Maybe they were like, I don't know, rivals in a class or in a debate team or in a sports team or whatever. They just need to not like each other for some reason. Then they're in the car, and then eventually they like each other, and they both need to. The reason they were going to California is relevant. In actual fact, you take that all away, two people who are opposites who then attract through a road trip. who are all both going to the same place. And I think if they made this movie today, they probably just wouldn't have had the sex as the goalpost, but they definitely would have had it as the goal. You know what I'm saying? Bow chicka.
I just thought of what it could be.
What,
really simple.
What? You don't like my mid-century modern armoire take? Better than that? I
obviously do.
Obviously.
But, okay, this is just another
Just in
take.
case. Yeah. Fine.
Really simple, really straightforward. Instead of it's a woman that you don't know who is willing to have sex with you, it could be an ex-girlfriend who wants to get back together.
Yeah. And
it's an ex-girlfriend who broke his heart, went away to California, calls him up and says, if you come to me, then we can get back together.
Done.
Straightforward, right? Because I think that's what it is. I think that's what the problem is. The problem is that she's a stranger.
And the movie's called Sex, but it's S with a space. X question mark.
Whoa.
Sex. It works on 2 different layers.
Yeah.
3
Asterisk.
if you count sex.
EX.
Yeah. S-E-X.
S capital EX. It's in there. We'll make it work. Fix it in post.
Great. It's so great.
Yeah. Hey, no, why not? Good.
Good.
Well, then that leads us to the final course of this wonderful dinner we've been enjoying together, which is to rate the movie.
Check, please.
And I'd love to know how many ropey knots of cheese out of 5 would you rate this film?
What was the Rome?
The ropey knots of cheese is when he's describing the pizza in his essay, which I really enjoyed.
On the tongue. 3.5. I like it. I'd watch it again. Hot Pursuit. I mean, the sure thing. I mean, 16 can't. I mean, it's John Cusack. I liked it. 3.5. 3.5 cheeses.
To potentially expose myself to accusations of hypocrisy, I'd like to posit that you have some Cusack points in there. I think I'm going to give it a 2.
Yeah.
Because we're at this stage now where we have to quite heavily base our rating on our enjoyment of the movie.
Yeah.
And I think, like I said, the kind of creepiness element was a big problem for me, which overrode some of the elements I potentially would have enjoyed more, which was like the relationship between the 2 leads and the writing. And I think it's just I can't unsee all the other films I've seen that do this. Unfortunately, I can't come at this with fresh eyes. It didn't, but I have done that with films where I've gone back and I've seen something and I've still been surprised. I know I mention it all the time, previous listeners, but Scream is the one I keep coming back to.
Totally.
Which is that I was still surprised. It did stuff I've seen before, but it was still felt fresh. And I do think that's possible. And I just don't think that this film does that, unfortunately.
That's fair.
So it's a 2 for me. But we do love you, John. And thank you so much for taking our hand and guiding us through the 1980s. It's been a pleasure.
I know. I'll see. It's like we're a fond farewell and a wave into the sunshine as we say goodbye to John Cusack. We already said goodbye to
Paul Rudd.
And
they're sitting in a cafe together.
Oh, my
and there's
God.
and they're giving us a fun wave. But the fun thing is that there's another empty seat right next to them. And we will find out who will fill it in the next season of Plot Twisters. We're not quite there yet because we have a couple more episodes. We're not quite there yet. We've got one more film from the 80s to talk about.
Yeah.
And then it's a whole new world of the 2000s. But until then, thank you for listening to this episode of Plot Twisters.
I imagine Paul Rudd leans over and pours syrup onto John Cusack's pancakes. Oh, also, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if you have the time.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.
John Cusack or Paul Rudd, who's better? Can't say. Impossible.
It's not possible. That's a cruel thing. Ooh.
Those are my boys you're talking about.
Which one of my kids do you like more? Stop it, Dad. It's not about that.
And that is why your kids are called Paul and John.
Oh, stop it now.